The giant LED banner above Georgetown's grand auditorium still blinked its sugary promise, unity in American politics, when JD Vance slipped through the door that was never supposed to open for him. No trumpet, no press pool. Only the hush of felted carpet under worn Oxfords and the startled breath of a student usher who recognized the square jaw from Senate hearings and Rust Belt documentaries. Vance offered a curt nod, eyes already sweeping the room as if mapping fault lines no one else acknowledged. 600-plus attendees, staffers in fitted suits, professors polishing their polite smiles, undergrads vibrating with caffeinated ambition, had spent weeks rehearsing the day's narrative. Vice President Kamala Harris would descend with oracular grace, deliver bipartisan comforts, accept curated questions, exit to standing ovations, and leave behind a highlight reel of civil harmony. Nothing in the run of show predicted a sitting Republican senator from Ohio, the self-proclaimed hillbilly turned best-selling author, occupying the last chair of the back row, like a hand grenade with its pin balanced. Emily Brooks, sociology junior and Ohio native, felt her pulse jump when she spotted him. Home looked back at her in his tired eyes, steel dust Dollar General parking lots. The slow collapse of townspeople in this room only referenced during election cycles. She tapped out a frantic group text, Vance in the hall, no pass. Phones lit up. Whispers spread. On-stage MC Marcus Coleman inhaled, glanced at the teleprompter, then at the uninvited senator. His trained baritone cracked on the first syllable of good morning. Earpieces buzzed. Ethan Miles, head of security, angled toward the aisle, weighing whether to act now or after Harris arrived. A removal caught on 27 live streams could torch an entire communication strategy before coffee break. Vance folded his arms. The posture was casual, the effect volcanic. Behind the stillness coiled a year of statistics tacked to a basement wall, late-night calls from laid-off cousins, and one USB drive pulsing in his pocket like a second heartbeat. Emily, summoned by a courage she barely recognized, slid down the row. "Sir, I think you need this," she whispered, pressing the thumb drive into his hand. It contained fresh Bureau of Labor leaks numbers, delayed for political optics numbers, that told the truth about a 3-point spike in Midwest unemployment, while coastal growth headlines sang another tune. Vance's jaw flexed gratitude flickering across steel blue eyes. 8:09 a.m. The double doors behind the stage burst open. Camera flashes strobed as Kamala Harris strode out, all practice poise and precise Navy tailoring. Applause unfurled, respectful, timid, as though the room sensed another gravity well forming in its midst. Harris scanned the audience, lips, lifting eyes, calculating. She saw him. The applause thinned. Vance didn't stand. He met her gaze, neither hostile nor deferential, but with the resigned firmness of someone who has dug graves for promises. A single second stretched into 10. Coleman coughed into his mic, hurry-skipping a paragraph of welcome text. Ethan Miles exchanged clipped whispers with stage staff, clear to approach negative optics nightmare. At the far end, Linda Westcub, reporter for the Hoya Chronicle, felt the hair rise on her arms. Story sparks blew around her like iron filings around a magnet. She flipped her DSLR to video. Her inner caption wrote itself, "Rust Belt Senator Crashes Unity Summit." Harris opened with practiced warmth. "We gather today to celebrate dialogue." But her cadence carried a brittle edge, the kind that forms when authority senses its own perimeter shrinking. Students clocked it instantly. Tension climbed their spines. Jason Harper, political science junior, muttered, "She's stalling." Halfway through sentence 3. "Our nation's strength is the chorus of every voice from sea to shining sea." Vance rose. Chairs squeaked. Some clapped out of reflex. Others froze. The senator's voice moved like river stone, rounded, heavy, unstoppable. "Madam Vice President, a chorus without baritones, still calls itself harmony, but the missing notes haunt the tune." A collective intake of breath. Coleman's script fluttered from his fingers. Harris paused, forced a smile, gestured graciously. "Be magnanimous. Stay in control, Senator. We'll gladly hear your questions during our moderated segment." Vance stepped into the aisle. "Questions are a luxury when your county just buried its third factory." He lifted the USB like a flame. This drive holds this month's Midwest numbers your Department of Labor shelved until after today. Call it political weatherproofing. I call it subtraction by silence. Ethan Miles signaled Mark Taylor, ex-Marine security. They advanced 2 paces, then stopped caught in the crosshairs of 24 phone cameras. Online viewers felt the fracture in real time. Shower of Rust Belt truth ticked upward. Linda's live counter hit 18K concurrent. Harris's voice dipped an octave. Senator, let's not derail. Derail, Vance echoed, soft as a hammer. We're already off track, freight. I'm just naming the wreck. Silence detonated. Screens around the hall filled with the pause, every face transcribing meaning onto it. In that hush, Emily's phone recorded the tiny tremor of Harris's exhale. Jason whispered, "This is bigger than a heckle. This is data. This is proof." Coleman forced his smile wide. "Perhaps we can integrate the senator's perspective in our Q&A." Vance turned to the student's voice pitched for clarity over volume. "When a government edits the truth to fit a podium who pays the overdraft, it's not the interns in DC. It's the welders in Chillicothe." A murmur rippled agreement, discomfort thrill at unvarnished confrontation. Harris reset her shoulders, but the room's axis had tilted. The script they'd memorized was bleeding ink onto the marble floor. Vance took a final step, reaching the empty microphone at stage left. He laid the USB on the lectern like evidence in a trial. "Upload it," he said to Coleman. "Let the numbers speak before we all pretend unity is stronger than gravity." Lights dimmed as text scrambled. The LED screen flickered. Somewhere in the crowd, a senior professor whispered, "If those figures are real, tomorrow's headlines are already written." The vice president's eyes narrowed, not rage, but the calculus of sudden vulnerability. And JD Vance, steady at the mic, felt the weight of his old Appalachian nights press behind his ribs, nights when truth was a candle you cupped against wind. He wasn't here to burn bridges. He was here to torch the fog that hid them. A thin blue progress bar crept across the giant screen. Then the first slide flared into life, 3 stark bars climbing like smokestacks. Ohio 6.9%, Michigan 7.5%, Pennsylvania 7.1%. Gasps pinballed off the marble vaulting. The numbers were clear, the font clinical, the year-over-year arrows blood red. No editorial, no hashtags, just a data punch that stole the auditorium's breath. JD Vance did not look at the slide. He knew those figures by heart. He'd carried them like gravestones in his coat pocket for 3 months. Instead, he studied the faces students mouthing 7-point-something as if it were a foreign dialect, professors blinking behind bifocals, staffers trying to remember the last time unemployment in their own zip code mattered. In the second row, Emily Brooks felt her phone vibrate violently, the livestream chat exploding fake source, mad respect. She angled the camera upward so viewers could see the raw crowd reaction, then whispered a single line meant for her mother back in Mansfield. "Told you he'd light the fuse." Coleman cleared his throat, voice wobbling. "Ladies and gentlemen, context is crucial. These regional variations." JD pivoted, microphone catching the rasp of his coat. "Context," he repeated, calm. "Context is a 12-hour shift at the Lordstown paint line, followed by a foreclosure notice. Context is a guidance counselor telling your kid college is a mirage unless he can code." His words carried the muscular patience of a man who had repeated the same warning in 100 VFW halls. On stage, a staffer handed Harris a tablet, urgent message glowing. She skimmed, lips tightening. The White House social team already flagged Rust Belt truth trending second only to a K-pop comeback. The memo suggested strategic empathy and swift pivot. Harris swallowed another smile into place and motioned for the next slide. But tech never reached slide 2. The screen glitched, then filled with the image nobody expected, a Department of Labor email header, date stamped May 29, 2025. Subject line, hold Midwest employment release until after Unity event. Below it, a sentence highlighted in yellow, early disclosure, not aligned with optimistic messaging. Recommend delay. The audience recoiled as if someone had smashed a window. Mark Taylor, the ex-Marine in the aisle, muttered a low whistle. Government concealment wasn't a fistfight he could break up. This was shrapnel through reputation armor. He glanced at Harris. Body language training told him everything: squared shoulders, softening pupils, dilating breath shallow. Vulnerability, not danger, and that made crowds hungrier. Linda West felt her reporter's instincts ignite. She double-tapped to focus on JD's jaw, the slight clench that said, "This is the moment." Her tweet fired into the ether smoking gun email on screen. Georgetown goes full Watergate. Before she could pocket the phone, retweets ticked past 1,000. Coleman tried again, voice pitched high to sound fatherly. "Senator, leaked correspondence can be misinterpreted." JD raised one hand, palm steady. "Misinterpretation is when you misspell a number. This is intention." Someone in Washington decided optimism sells better than the Midwest working. He let that hang, then softer, more dangerous. "Madam Vice President, did you read this before today?" Harris gripped the podium. The cameras loved her. She'd mastered every lens since her Senate days, but this question bent light. She could deflect demand verification or embrace transparency and look blindsided by her own administration. All three paths cut deep. Finally, she inhaled microphone, catching the faint tremor. "I will not validate unverified leaks when the department issues an official statement." "Official statements," JD interrupted, "are what you read after someone else bleeds for the truth." A rumble of approval rolled from the student section. Jason Harper slapped the armrest. Emily's chat feed flooded with blue-collar emojis and the phrase, "Let him finish." Ethan Miles tapped his earpiece. Command advises non-intervention public optics hostile. Translation, keep hands off the grenade. JD's gaze drifted to the balcony, where a lone figure shifted his younger brother Dylan, freshman on scholarship hoodie, swallowed by the shadows. Dylan's eyes brimmed with fear and pride, an alloy JD recognized from Steel Mill Nights, fear of backlash pride in someone finally saying it. The senator's chest tightened, a reminder that courage borrowed interest from family. He refocused on the mic. "Unity," he said slowly, "starts where numbers hurt. It starts where mayors cut ribbons on tech incubators, while welders pawn toolboxes. If you want real unity, unlock the data vault. Let the country argue with facts." He turned to Harris' voice, no louder than a porch-light prayer. "Give the kids in this hall the unvarnished ledger, then ask them to dream." Harris held her tablet like a shield. The plan had been 30 minutes of uplift, a Q&A pre-screened for civility. Now every lens gorged on the crack in her armor. She searched for a bridging phrase. None tasted safe. So she pivoted to protocol. "Senator Vance, submit your material to our moderators and we will..." JD stepped back, index finger, tapping the USB. "Already did." 3 minutes ago, the tech booth mirrored this drive to a public Dropbox. Anyone with a phone now owns the truth. Control just left the building. Coleman's breath caught audibly over the house PA. Students lunged for QR codes splashed onto the side screens. Phones rose like 100 lit torches. Data files began downloading 15 megabytes of tables, graphs, and the memo. Within seconds, the Dropbox link crawled across Telegram Discord. A genie sprinting, no bottle in sight. Mark Taylor exhaled both admiration and dread. History, he knew, often smelled like ozone right before lightning. He repositioned himself not to block, but to witness. Harris's advisors gathered in the wings, forming a tight semicircle, mouths moving, hands slicing the air. She nodded once, then addressed the room, tone reset to stateswoman. "We welcome robust debate. This administration fights every day for workers from Akron to Anaheim, but debate demands mutual respect." JD dipped his head. "Respect is born the moment power stops whispering and starts listening." Lightning flash from Linda's DSLR. Emily's stream counter hit 42K. Outside, distant sirens signaled a motorcade's redirected route, security reshuffling, because narrative chaos has a way of spilling into streets. JD glanced at his watch, 8:17 a.m. 9 minutes since he'd stood. 9 minutes to rewrite an event sculpted for months. He felt no triumph, only the familiar ache of holding a line alone. Yet he sensed something shift, students murmuring in dialects of possibility, faculty eyes wet with the shock of recognizing their own insulation. Truth, once unsheathed, drew blood from comfort first. He leaned closer to the mic, voice settling into a deliberate hush that forced the hall to lean in. "I have one request. Keep the lights up and the cameras rolling. Let America decide what unity sounds like when the missing notes finally carry. The screen behind him faded to black, awaiting a new command. In that temporary dark, the silhouettes of Kamala Harris and JD Vance stood like opposing chess pieces caught in mid-game, the board now visible to every spectator on Earth. A breathless second passed, no slides, no teleprompter text, only the hum of stage lights straining against the silence. In that void, the audience heard things usually buried below applause, the scratch of a pen, the nervous cough of a donor on the aisle, the hollow rattle of a camera lens locking focus. Truth had pried open the room, and no one quite knew how to close it. Kamala Harris was first to move. She lifted her chin, the gesture small but purposeful, and addressed the tech booth. "House feed please cycle to panel graphics." In ordinary circumstances, the order would have been routine. Now it tasted like a retreat. The operator hesitated. Half the country was screen-grabbing each frame. Switch the image, and it would look like censorship. Leave it blank, and the vacuum might swallow the vice president's credibility whole. He chose inertia. The screen stayed black as if mourning certainty. Down on the main floor, Ethan Miles's radio crackled. "Command wants a readiness check," the voice whispered. Code for prepare to escort, though none dared say, "remove a sitting senator." Ethan's gaze cut to Mark Taylor. Both men understood the optics uniforms dragging a Rust Belt veteran off stage, while unemployment charts still glowed on every phone. Direct confrontation would ignite a bonfire. Subtle containment was all that remained. JD Vance felt the calculus in their stances, the half-step closer, the fingers drumming on belt clips, but his focus slid to the balcony. Dylan now leaned forward, knuckles white around the brass rail. JD's pulse thudded. For a flash, he was 16 again, promising a scared little brother that grown-ups could still be made to listen. "Hold steady," he mouthed. Dylan nodded, eyes shimmering with a pride that hurt. The hush fractured when Linda West shouted from 3 rows up, her reporter's instincts drowning decorum. "Senator, do you believe the administration intentionally buried the numbers?" Heads swung as if pulled by magnets. Harris's staff winced. They had not sanctioned open press. JD answered without turning from the mic. "Intent is a question for the sender. I'm only the courier exposing the seal was broken." He paused, letting the line settle like weight on a scale. "But if intent is ignorance, we still have a government willing to trade transparency for timing." Harris stepped forward, heels clicking an audible heartbeat of authority. "With respect, Senator leadership also means preventing panic with incomplete data." JD met her eyes. Panic grows in dark rooms. Turn on the light and call it morning. The crowd reacted. Some clapped, others bristled. Coleman raised both palms, seeking calm he no longer owned. "Let's restore order," he said, though order felt obsolete. Emily Brooks's livestream chat bled emojis, torches, factory gears, broken chains. The count surpassed 60K. In Modesto, in Buffalo, in Birmingham, watchers huddled around phones, classrooms, breakroom TVs. The story had slipped the leash of Georgetown and now sprinted through every time zone. Backstage, Harris's communications director, a razor-sharp woman named Ava Singh, made a choice. She slid a slim tablet onto the podium in front of her principal, a single sentence glowing bold: "Acknowledge pain, invite collaboration." Harris straightened. When she spoke again, her tone softened, drawn from well-rehearsed empathy, but laced with genuine steel. "I hear the pain behind those numbers." She began, hands open, voice pitched to reach the balcony. "I've walked factory floors in Youngstown and Benton Harbor. We are rebuilding with apprenticeships, clean energy grants, and fair shot loans programs your party often rejects in committee." The jab was gentle but unmistakable. Murmurs rippled. JD answered it head on. "Programs look fine on a funding sheet, but back home they look like 3-year waits and paperwork labyrinths." He raised one finger. "Give me a single steelworker today who can point to a pay stub stamped clean energy transition. Just one, Madam Vice President." Harris's brow furrowed. Policy details lined up behind her eyes, yet none of them countered a simple anecdote shaped like loss. She pivoted toward aspiration. "Then let's partner, Senator. Will you commit publicly right now to co-sponsor the Midwest Workforce Act? A deft trap agreement could blunt his outsider blaze. Refusal could paint him obstructionist." The room leaned forward. JD inhaled, remembering town hall nights where a promise felt cheaper than bread. "I'll co-sponsor," he said, "if the act mandates real-time publication of all regional labor data, no embargoes." He extended an open palm across 20 feet of stage. "Transparency for funding. Deal." The audience roared, the kind of roar that wasn't applause but a collective "finally." Cameras flashed. Dylan whooped from the balcony. Emily's phone shook. Harris hesitated, a breath, sensing the optics. Then she crossed the distance heels, silent now, and clasped his hand. A shutter click ricocheted across the marble like gunfire. Unity captured, but on terms neither side had foreseen. In that instant, the auditorium felt lighter, yet underneath flowed a deeper current. Linda West recognized it first. The narrative pivoted from ambush to negotiation, but the wound JD opened still bled. She scribbled a headline in her notebook: "Truth as entry fee, Vance forces, data for dollars bargain." Ethan Miles exhaled. Escort orders evaporated. He signaled his team to stand down, but maintained perimeter. History had not finished writing its footnotes. Mark Taylor caught JD's eye, offered a subtle nod. "In Marine code it meant fair fight, sir." JD dipped his head in return, an unspoken oath to keep it fair. Ava Singh leaned toward Harris, whispering stats about live view counts and focus group spikes. The VP listened, then surprised her staff by gesturing for JD to share the podium. Coleman scrambled to add a second mic. Two name plaques, Harris Vance, now glared side by side like reluctant siblings forced into a family portrait. Since the room demands real conversation, Harris announced, "Senator Vance and I will take unscripted questions from students, 5 minutes." The gasp was unanimous. Unscripted in Washington. That word felt riskier than dynamite. Yet phones, rose hands shot up, and for the first time since banners were hung, the event felt worthy of its marquee. JD glanced at Dylan, saw the kid's fist pump victory in the air, and felt a swell of hope, heavy as his Appalachian hills. Maybe unity wasn't the absence of conflict. Maybe it was conflict conducted in the light. As the first student approached the aisle, Mike, trembling, emboldened, about to ask what no schedule ever allowed, the black screen behind the stage flickered back to life. Not with talking points, but with the Dropbox QR code larger than a door, its square mosaic humming "scan for full dataset." The truth released demanded to be read by anyone willing to look. Somewhere far beyond Georgetown factory, whistles blew for the lunch shift. And for once, their echo reached the marble halls of power before the day's speeches ended. A hush fell that was thicker than any applause, as though the room itself braced for impact. The student who reached the floor mic looked impossibly young, freckles, linen blazer, 2 sizes large press badge slung like armor. Her name tag read, Ariana Nguyen, Econ 27. She cleared her throat, the sound amplified, until every heartbeat synchronized with it. "Madam Vice President Senator Vance," she began, voice vibrating between nerves and resolve. "My parents run a nail salon outside Dayton. When COVID hit, relief forms were a maze. Federal site crashes, state hotlines, dead, months of silence." She glanced down, notes scribbled on a coffee sleeve, but kept speaking. "Last week the landlord hiked rent. We can't afford a clean energy transition, or to wait while data gets massaged. My question is simple. What day, not what year, will a small business like ours see $1 from any program both of you just promised to improve?" Harris inhaled, shoulders squaring into public servant empathy. "First, Ariana, thank you for the courage to share your family's story." JD raised a hand gently, an unexpected alliance gesture. "Madam Vice President, allow me 30 seconds, then the floor is yours." Harris nodded. Cameras zoomed. Vance leaned toward Ariana, lowering his timbre until it felt like a campfire confessional the whole hall leaned into. "Your parents won't care which party signs the check. They care whether their lights stay on July 1st. The Midwest Workforce Act we just shook on is slated for markup next week. I'll make a public amendment grant funds released within 60 days of appropriation applications, no longer than 5 pages, and every denial published online with a reason code." He looked to Harris, a dare framed as collaboration. "Madam Vice President." Harris resisted the instinct to counterpunch. Instead, she pivoted, voice warm enough to steam glass. 60 days is ambitious, but we can pilot it. Ariana, I commit to task our small business administration team to draft that streamlined form within 10. Applause burst, ragged, genuine. For the first time that morning, two ideologies braided into a rope strong enough to haul someone out of quicksand. Yet unity once tasted beckons skepticism. From the back row, a deeper voice rang. And who audits that timeline? All heads spun. The speaker was a tall figure in a faded UAW jacket, Miguel Rosas, regional union organizer, officially invited to sit on a later panel, but until now content to watch. His question carried gravel. Numbers hid once. What stops the shuffle next quarter? JD smiled ruefully. Sunlight and repetition, brother. He tapped the Dropbox code on screen. Every 90 days those numbers go live, or the act sunsets. Automatic. No vote required. Call it political self-destruct. A ripple of disbelief turned to electricity. Self-destruct clauses were myths in Washington. Attaching one in real time felt like watching someone weld rail as the train approached. Harris's advisor Ava flashed a careful signal, but the VP's expression softened into something bordering on admiration. You want an auto sunset? We'll add an oversight board with equal seats Labour and business students too, Ariana. Transparency with teeth. Miguel crossed his arms, grudging respect brewing. Then post-term, the seats for open election, not appointments. Coleman's eyebrows shot skyward. The dialogue had left ivory tower altitude and was tunneling into legislative bedrock. Emily's live stream soared past 80K. Viewers hammered emojis, ballots, hammers, olive branches. In Toledo, a lunchroom screen lit cheers. In Wilmington, skeptical retirees leaned closer. The next questioner, a tall theology major named Dominic Ruiz, stepped up. My uncle served in Iraq, came home to an opioid script and a pink slip. Faith groups fill gaps your agencies ignore. Will the Workforce Act fund recovery-friendly employers? JD's jaw clenched. Ghosts of friends lost to pills flickered behind his eyes. Write it in, he said, voice rough. Tax credits for companies hiring folks and treatment penalties for those who fire at the first relapse. Dominic exhaled, eyes moist. Harris added, and expand VA outpatient liaisons into those same job centers so veterans don't navigate two labyrinths. Another bloom of applause. On the fringe, Ethan Miles caught Mark Taylor's glance. Both men realized they were guarding a peace talk disguised as confrontation. Taylor whispered, never seen a riot deflate into a committee draft before. Ethan half smiled. Democracy by improvised meeting messy but beats blood. Dylan Vance wiped a tear before anyone could notice. In that droplet lived every hard night when JD promised words could still muscle open doors welded shut. Below, his brother did not look heroic. He looked authentically tired, sleeves, rumpled eyes ringed. But inside that fatigue burned an ember named purpose. No spin doctor could coat. Ariana lingered near the aisle phone, buzzing with pings, friends, strangers, reporters, all asking what it felt like to crack Washington's veneer. She typed shaky thumbs. Feels like a window after winter cold air, but honest. Coleman checked the clock. The 5-minute pledge had ballooned to 15. Yet cutting it felt criminal. He made a choice to ride the wave. Final student question. He announced, then we break. A hand rose small, tremulous. A first-year international student, Zainab Al-Hadi, hijab the color of midnight ink. Her voice quavered. Unity is easy when you are listened to in English. What will this act do for workers whose first language is silence, because policy never speaks theirs? The microphone fed her question into the rafters like a bell toll. JD answered first, quiet, deliberate. Data tables don't care what language your mother used to sing you to sleep. But the forms to access help sure do. I failed my own mama filling out FAFSA. Will budget translation lines, multi-language hotlines, and field officers in churches, mosques, VFWs, wherever the accent of home lives. Harris stepped beside him, not behind, and laid palm over her heart. I pledge to sign that language equity clause the hour it hits my desk. Her gaze swept the crowd from Zainab to Miguel, from Ariana to Dylan. Unity begins the moment we decide no voice is background noise. A hush settled, not the brittle silence of shock, but the fertile stillness before seed breaks soil. For 10 heartbeats, the auditorium tasted rarity power, listening power, conceding power, crafting new texture in real time. Then phones collectively chime news alerts blossoming on screens. Georgetown's summit turns into live negotiation. Harris Vance co-author bill amendments on stage. Anchors scrambled, pundits inhaled hot takes. But inside the hall, no one moved. JD turned to Harris, extended his hand again, this time not as challenge but as seal. She clasped it. The shutter burst sounded like fireworks. From the balcony, Dylan shouted, cracked voice proud, "Bring it home, JD!" Laughter, cheers, tears tumbled together. Even Coleman's teleprompter blanked as if tech itself surrendered to the moment. Somewhere in a Capitol sub-basement, legislative aides prepared for an overnight scramble. But here, beneath Gothic arches older than most states, a senator raised by steel dust and a vice president tempered in courtrooms discovered a thread of agreement stronger than partisan weave transparency as precondition for hope. Lights dimmed to half. Coleman announced a 15-minute recess to configure subsequent panels to this new reality. People laughed, nervous, relieved. They were no longer attendees. They were witnesses. And on the black screen, a single line glowed over the QR mosaic, truth uploaded. Unity under revision. The moment the recess was gavelled, the auditorium dissolved into overlapping vortices. Students swarmed the QR code like honeybees. Reporters sprinted for signal bars, and staffers clustered around Harris and Vance, frantic to translate raw electricity into legislative prose before it vanished. Yet in the eye of the storm, the two protagonists stood shoulder to shoulder at the lip of the stage, sharing a silence more eloquent than any press release. JD Vance was first to break it. He exhaled a weary laugh pitched for her ears alone. 5 years in the Senate, and I've never drafted statute on a lectern. Harris's lips twitched, half grin, half grimace. Try being a former prosecutor forced to ad-lib economic policy because a hillbilly elegy footnote hacked the run of show. Her tone carried no malice, only the grudging respect warriors grant each other when their blades meet evenly. She extended a hand-scribbled sticky note 3 bullet points under the heading Workforce Act Live Amend. My counsel's rough sketch, she said. Needs your red pen. JD scanned the note translation funding 90-day data dump auto sunset. He clicked a ballpoint, struck the word pilot beside 60-day grants and wrote mandatory. Then he added oversight board seats, elected not appointed. He tapped the page once, sealing the bargain. Non-negotiable. Harris nodded, eyes sharpening with calculation, and to JD's surprise, a flicker of relief. Good. If we're going to jump, we land on concrete, not foam. Below them, Emily Brooks attempted a selfie that would travel continents, the QR mosaic glowing behind her, the unlikely duo above. The photo captured raw, unfiltered astonishment on dozens of faces, an accidental fresco of civic awakening. She posted with a single caption, "It's not unity until you feel the weld." In the press pen, Linda West fielded simultaneous calls. National desks wanted color cable bookers, demanded slots, and an editor barked, "Find the conflict. This is too tidy." Linda scanned the hall and located it. Ava Singh was arguing with a middle-aged man in a tailored charcoal suit, the White House's deputy chief of staff, fresh from a motorcade reroute. His handshake earlier had been conspicuously absent. Now his finger jabbed the air between them. Linda's long lens caught snippets risk midterms, unauthorized concessions. Story veins pulsed. Meanwhile, in a narrow service corridor backstage, Security Chief Ethan Miles debriefed Mark Taylor. New directive eyes on any hostile agitators, digital or physical. Mark frowned, meaning Ethan lifted his phone. On screen, a group chat crawled with fringe accounts branding the summit a deep state psyop calling for a protest swarm. We stop them at the gate, or the narrative gets hijacked. Mark's marine instincts fired. Copy. I'll double exterior sweeps. He paused, a ghost of concern passing. And if Washington yanks the plug on this detente, Ethan's silence was answer enough. Back in the auditorium, Dylan Vance weaved through clusters of students until he reached his brother. JD saw him coming, arms open. They embraced, brief, fierce. Dylan whispered, "Mom's watching." She cried when the numbers hit the screen. JD's throat tightened. "Tell her the fight's only worth it if she can pay the electric bill on time." Dylan smirked. She texted, "About damn time someone made them listen." A bell tone signaled 5 minutes left in recess. Coleman flustered, but oddly exhilarated, conferred with panel moderators now tasked with shepherding legislation instead of platitudes. He muttered, "This is either the dawn of participatory democracy or the birth of a procedural nightmare." The policy professor beside him replied, "Why not both?" Overhead, the LED screen cycled to a live counter, data pack downloads 213,214,600. Each tick felt like democratic proof of life. Sylvia Kowalski, a junior statistics major, shouted, "Checksum matches original no edits." Laughter rippled. A cloud of cynicism had lifted enough to let numbers shine unfiltered. But beneath that optimism, darker currents stirred. Ava Singh's phone pinged with a push alert. Midwest Workforce Act triggers backbench revolt House leaders, question cost. Another market jitter on transparency clause analyst warns of data panic. She turned to Harris. "Resistance is mobilizing. They'll brand this reckless. We need modeling dollar figures yesterday." JD overheard replied dryly, "They fear numbers because numbers don't negotiate." He checked his own messages, a conglomerate lobbyist advising caution, a hometown preacher sending prayer hands, a Marine buddy texting, "Semper Fi brother, don't flinch." He pocketed the phone. Every ping was a strand in the web, now tightening around him. Outside, Gus rattled cherry blossom branches, petals swirling like confetti for a parade that hadn't decided its hero. Campus police reported a small crowd forming at the front gate placards, reading "Facts First" and "Unity Erasure." Mark Taylor watched from the steps, noting energy but no malice for now. Recess wound down. Coleman tapped the lectern mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please retake your seats. The program resumes with an impromptu working session on the Midwest Workforce Act amendments." The absurdity of the sentence drew a collective grin. Georgetown's marble columns had hosted presidents and popes, but never a committee markup powered by student Wi-Fi. Harris and Vance returned center stage. She opened. "We promised 5 questions. We took 4 and drafted half a bill. The 5th will come after lunch when legal counsel warn us what we broke." Laughter genuine. Then her voice settled to formal resonance. "Senator Vance and I commit here on record to publish a joint outline within 48 hours. We further invite any university union or small business coalition to submit language via the portal now live at." JD pointed to the screen. A new URL bloomed: workforce.draft.gov input. "We'll read it all," he said. "And if we don't, the timestamps will show our ghosting." Applause rose, tentative, then roaring. In that crescendo, Ariana hugged Zainab. Miguel bumped fists with Dominic. Strangers now tethered by the audacity of transparent governance. Linda West hit send on her headline "From Heckle to Hackathon. Georgetown turns lecture into law workshop." She smiled, sensing history's hinge squeak. But she added a subhead her editor would love: "Can sunrise last when power wants night?" High above the stained glass window of St. Ignatius, caught a shard of noon sun, and flung it across the stage, bathing the unlikely collaborators in fractured color: violet on JD's sleeve, gold on Harris's collar. For a heartbeat, they looked less like rivals, more like stained glass saints of a republic still under construction. Yet saints are mortal, and construction sites invite sabotage. In a basement server room across town, a political action committee strategist drafted attack ads, grainy freeze frames of Harris smiling beside Vance's ominous voiceover about backroom deals. Another pack crafted inverse footage Vance labeled "opportunist handshake," looped to suggest capitulation. The engines of division revved, hungry for fuel. On stage, oblivious for one more minute, JD and Kamala shook hands again, firmer, a promise sealed in marrow. The audience stood, a tide of applause rolling decadently long. But even as they turned to exit for the scheduled lunch, both felt the weight settle. Forging unity in public had been the easy part. Defending it hour by hour, tweet by attack ad, might break bones neither knew they still possessed. Outside, distant thunder grumbled over the Potomac. Spring storms were forecast, but the barometer inside Georgetown had already dropped. Lightning would return data flash partisan strike narrative wildfire. Whether the new-built bridge of transparency could hold until dawn would be tested soon. For now, though, the marble hall rang with one undeniable sound, hope hitting the rafters like a song nobody realized they remembered. The catering hall 2 floors below the auditorium had been prepped for finger sandwiches, polite networking, and anodyne panel chatter. What it received instead was a swarm of adrenaline-lit students, press and staff converging like storm fronts. Silver platters trembled beneath the sudden weight of consequence. Spinach canapes went half-eaten while laptops bloomed across white linen rounds their screens, a mosaic of PDFs, spreadsheets, and frantic Slack threads. JD Vance hovered near a coffee urn, stirring nothing in a paper cup, hearing everything snippets of optimism, shards of backlash. 60-day disbursement. Impossible hissed a commerce aide into her phone. Auto sunset is genius, makes them prove results, countered a grad student balancing 3 brownie bites on 1 napkin. At the far wall, Ariana coached Zainab through opening an Excel model. Someone had just emailed from MIT projected grant flow. If translation services were funded at 2% of program cost instead of 0.5, policy by potluck. Policy. Across the room, Kamala Harris stood beneath a skylight, the pale glass etching wary lines across her face. Her comms director, Ava Singh, read updates from an iPad pushback from House leadership cable punditry, hardening into talking point ice. They're calling it Unitygate. On one channel, Madam Vice President, too much transparency, not enough vetting. Harris lifted her gaze to Vance. Remind me to congratulate them on inventing a scandal where the crime is listening. A sudden cheer erupted by the windows. Emily Brooks had projected the real-time public feedback portal onto the plaster comment count, already cresting 15,000. Buried among the emojis and hot takes were rigorous policy memos, one tagged Recovery Ready Employer Verification Pilot Outline, another multilingual hotline workflow. Emily spun eyes sparkling and shouted, "Crowd law is alive." The hall answered with applause that rattled wine glasses. Yet in the back corner, Miguel Rosas watched his phone with furrowed brow. Messages from union colleagues had shifted tone skepticism, edging towards suspicion. Corporate tax credits. Strings, a rival organizer, warned of hillbilly Trojan horses. Miguel pocketed the device jaw tight. Change that arrives too fast can look like a trap. Outside, the sky finally surrendered. Its threat rain began to drum the stained glass, turning campus walks slick and silver. Mark Taylor and Ethan Miles monitored the entrance foyer radios alive with weather alerts and the approach of an unaffiliated protest caravan. 10, maybe 15 vehicles signage obscured by grey sheets. Ethan issued position security at every ingress dialogue, first de-escalate always. Back upstairs, Linda West cornered Deputy Chief of Staff Harold Denton, recorder flashing red. Sir, as the White House prepared to override the transparency clause, Denton's smile was as thin as a headline font. We're reviewing fiscal implications. Reviewing or defanging? Linda pressed. He pivoted away, but not before she caught the flicker of annoyance that told her the story's next heartbeat. JD set down his untouched coffee and approached Kamala. Rainlight scattered across the marble between them. Rumor says leadership will strip the auto-sunsetting committee, she answered with a weary tilt of her head. Rumor meets reality by dinner at the whip's office. We hold the line, JD said. We hold the line, she echoed, though her eyes measured the distance to that line and the volley of arrows already arching over it. Senator might borrow you, Ava interjected, leading JD to a half-circle of legal counsel scribbling on a foam board. They needed statutory language tight enough to survive parliamentarian review. JD rewound his coal-black Sharpie and wrote under the heading, Transparency Provision Failure to Publish Quarterly Data shall suspend allocation of administrative funds to managing agency until compliance. Counsel winced knife-edge hard, but they copied it. Meanwhile, Dylan shuffled through the buffet plate empty. He found himself beside Miguel. Wild morning, huh? The freshman offered. Miguel's nod was slow. Wild doesn't pay dues. I need guarantees in writing. Dylan swallowed. They're writing, sir. Miguel tapped the younger man's chest with one thick finger. Then make sure they remember who bleeds when ink fades. He strode off, leaving Dylan staring at a congealing quiche. Lightning cracked. Lights blinked once. A collective inhale swept the hall. When the fluorescence steadied, so did the resolve of everyone huddled over draft clauses. The storm felt personal now, nature underscoring risk. Emily bumped into Zainab, both near giddy and terrified. "Did you ever imagine," Emily began. Zainab finished, "that a question about language access could change federal bill text in 4 hours?" They laughed, a sound like glass chimes in wind. 2:04 p.m. Coleman shepherded the herd back upstairs. The rain-glossed windows cast the auditorium in twilight, though it was early afternoon. People filed in, clutching annotated handouts, amendment sheets printed on hurried office copiers, toner streaks like battle scars. On stage, a long table appeared with name cards: Harris, Vance, Rosas, Nguyen, Ruiz, Al-Hadi. Georgetown branding crews worked miracles under pressure. Ethan Miles radioed caravan at main gate, mix of populist flags and camera crews. Peaceful but loud. Coleman dimmed house lights anyway, not for drama, but to keep eyes forward away from any flash outside. As the reconvened audience settled, JD leaned toward Kamala. "If they yank this later, we bring it back here," he murmured. "Town hall it in every swing county." She met his gaze. "Make them fear the sunlight," she said, and the pact between two ideological opposites calcified into something neither party machine had foreseen. Coleman tapped the mic. "We reconvene not as speakers and spectators, but as co-authors. The revised agenda review live amendments, vote on consensus recommendations, and schedule joint transmission to the Senate Help Committee by noon tomorrow." Thunder rumbled approval. Linda West cued her next live stream intro. Traffic spiked the moment she spoke. Headlines across networks updated banners. Unity Hall DIY democracy continues amid storm. Outside, protesters unfurled rain-splattered banners, some cheering transparency, others jeering grandstanders. The low drum of their chants seeped through stone like distant artillery, but inside the hall, microphones cleared throats, pens clicked, and democracy improvised imperfect luminous, prepared to wrestle another page of law into existence before the storm passed. Coleman's gavel tap echoed like a starter pistol. Around the long conference table, the improvised coalition adjusted microphones that still bore the university's crest, now less a brand than a witness mark. Rain pattered a nervous backbeat on the high windows. Thunder rolled counterpoint whenever debate spiked. The first agenda line, translation and accessibility, fell to Zainab Al-Hadi. Her palms trembled until she anchored them on the table's oak edge. Clause 7b adds certified interpreters to every workforce center. She began, voice steadier than her hands. Funded at 3% of total appropriation, not 2%. She looked straight at the C-SPAN camera, hastily wedged between floral columns. Because 1% is the difference between dignity and a bureaucracy you can't pronounce. Applause crackled. JD Vance gave a single nod, campfire encouragement. Harris murmured, seconded, and the motion sailed unanimous. Miguel Rosas took the next item, recovery-friendly employer credits. He leaned into the mic, UAW jacket creasing like battle colors. Add labor standard verification. No company gets a tax break while slashing overtime or busting unions. His baritone filled the hall with steel mill finality. A commerce lobbyist in row 3 hissed an objection, but before Coleman could call order, Dylan Vance rose from the audience gallery, voice cracked but clear. "Mr. Rosa speaks for workers who've buried co-workers next to oxy bottles." The hush that followed was not pity, it was recognition. Clause passed 5-0. Outside the protest caravan thickened umbrellas, homemade megaphones, and a few masks emblazoned with partisan logos. Mark Taylor watched from the portico. He counted symbols of 3 different movements, all loud, none yet violent. But in the crowd's churn he spotted a cluster moving with purpose rather than passion, no chanting eyes sweeping doors. Professionals in civilian costume. Instinct prickled. He radioed Ethan possible agitators' western flank. Ethan's curt reply, contain, film everything. Back inside, Ariana, Nguyen introduced grant disbursement timeline. 60 days seemed audacious at 10 a.m. She said, tapping her laptop, but CrowdLaw just coded a portal to auto-score applications in miners' time. "We can do 45. A murmur, half awe, half fear of impossible promises. JD raised an eyebrow at Harris. She shrugged. Let's walk the ledge together. They voted. 45 days became policy. The thunder outside cracked so hard the ceiling lights flickered. In that heartbeat of darkness, the room heard a roar, not of weather but of people protesters surging closer, chant morphing, "No secret deals, no secret deals." Linda West's phone buzzed campus police push alert western entrance compromised. She slipped to the side aisle rolling video just as Coleman tapped his mic for calm. The hall doors opened. Ethan Miles stepped in, rain glistening on his blazer. "All secure," he announced, voice firm. "But we advise expediting remaining votes." Kamala Harris read the undercurrent finish before footage of scuffles hijacked airtime. "Then let's tackle the hard one," she said, eyes sweeping the room. Transparency clause. JD inhaled. This was the line of fire. Counsel on both sides had warned of precedent of agencies hamstrung by public panic. He spoke anyway. Quarterly data or frozen funds. No exemptions, no discretionary delay. He pushed the printed clause toward Harris. "Ink it." Silence tensed like bowstring. Cameras zoomed. Staffers in the wings stopped breathing. Harris studied the page, the senator beside her, and perhaps the silhouette of her own legacy. She uncapped a pen whose blue matched the bruised sky and signed with a single loop. "Consider it etched," she said. The room exhaled sharp and loud. Thunder answered almost congratulatory. Coleman rapped gavel. "Amendments adopted unanimously. Draft will transmit at 11:00 a.m. tomorrow Eastern." The declaration felt surreal. A day that began scripted had birthed a living bill under stormlight, but stories seldom end in marble peace. A commotion burst from the lobby, a single crash of glass, then shouts. The chamber doors slammed. Mark Taylor barked, "Lockdown." Panic-rippled chairs, scraped papers, fluttered like startled birds. Ethan appeared, breath short. Small group forced a side panel. No weapons visible but throwing paint balloons red and blue. Symbolic carnage. He eyed the dais. "We can evacuate backstage." JD stood. Then they win headline, "Transparency drowned in pigment." He stalked to the edge of the stage, grabbed a house mic, and spoke not to the hall, but to the lobby beyond, voice magnified until it rattled the chandeliers. "Whoever you are, come in. See the clauses before you vandalize them, or live stream your fear of the light. Your choice." A hush followed. Then the doors opened cautiously. 5 soaked figures stepped in red and blue splatter dripping from latex gloves. They hesitated under 100 cameras. One, a young woman with streaked mascara, shouted, "It's a sham politicians always spin." JD didn't flinch. He pointed to the glowing QR code. "Spin that yourself. Every comma is online. If it lies, expose it." He gestured to empty gallery seats. "Or sit red amend like the rest of us. But know this paint dries. Numbers don't." The protesters exchanged glances. The woman dropped her balloon. It burst softly on the marble, a puddle of purple unity formed by accidental mix. They sat. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then whole. Even Miguel clapped, thick palms echoing approval. Ariana wiped a tear. Zainab whispered a prayer of thanks. Harris leaned toward JD, voice warm with fragile hope. "You might have started something bigger than either of us." JD's answer was almost a vow. "Then let's be big enough to carry it." Coleman, eyes shining, lifted the gavel once more. The session stands adjourned. The people's work proceeds. Thunder rolled away into distant sky as though the storm satisfied moved on. Students poured into aisles, phones aloft, documenting purple paint-signed clauses and the improbable handshake still bright on every screen. Outside, rain eased to a mist. Mark Taylor radioed all clear and allowed himself a rare grin. In the foyer, the silent agitators stared at the bill printouts Miguel handed them. One whispered, 45 days. "Is that real?" Miguel answered. "It is if you hold them to it." Down the corridor, Linda West filed her story, Stormlight Compromise when paint met policy and transparency won. She ended with a line she hadn't planned, but suddenly believed democracy is louder than thunder if enough people speak at once. Evening settled over Georgetown. Petals from rain-shaken blossoms clung to wet stone like confetti after parade. and within thousands of phones, laptops and hearts, a living document marched beyond marble walls inked by unlikely hands, guarded by strangers turned allies waiting to prove whether a nation could in fact hold the line it just drew in purple. Night crept over Washington like ink spilled across parchment, swallowing the spires and domes until only their warning lights glowed red against low clouds. In a corner office on the 4th floor of the Russell Senate building, JD Vance leaned on the marble sill and watched headlights smear across Constitution Avenue. The rain had stopped, but water still wept from carved stone eaves, an urban echo of the day's catharsis. Behind him, 6 staffers picked apart every line of the still warm Midwest Workforce Act draft. Laptops hummed. Printers coughed page after page. The aroma of burnt coffee overpowered the polished wood scent. JD felt spent, hollowed out yet fiercely awake, like a forge left glowing long past midnight. His phone vibrated, a message from Dylan. "Mom made me print the bill for the fridge. She's calling it the fridge of record." JD chuckled, pocketing the device. That small kitchen in Middletown had never held legislation before, only coupons, prayer cards, and report cards smudged by time. The door cracked open. Senator Margaret O'Neill, chair of the Help Committee, slipped inside raincoat draped over one arm. Her silver hair framed eyes sharp as flint. "I toured your circus on C-SPAN," she said without preamble. "Impressive. Also incendiary." She tapped the transparency clause with a manicured nail. "Do you realize how many agencies will revolt?" JD faced her squarely. "Truth shouldn't need consent, Margaret." "Truth, no. Bureaucracy, yes." She sighed, softening. "But I admire the audacity." Then she handed him a slim folder. "Whip's tally. If we voted tonight, you'd lose 5 moderates on the auto sunset." Inside, red minus signs bled across names JD had counted as allies. O'Neill added, "They fear quarterly panics tanking markets. You and Harris have 24 hours to offer a pressure valve." "A sunset is the valve," JD muttered, but she was already at the door. "Find another," she said, fading into hallway murmur. Across town in the Eisenhower Executive Office, Kamala Harris met with Chief of Staff Carlos Marquez beneath chandeliers bright as interrogation lamps. A whiteboard listed 2 columns, upside and risk. Upside held a short, gleaming trio: bipartisan win, Rust Belt goodwill, Gen Z enthusiasm. Risk sprawled downward: agency revolt, market volatility, leadership backlash, optics of capitulation. Marquez circled the last twice. "You shook hands on live feed. That image forces our caucus to defend something we haven't priced." Harris rubbed her temples. Memory replayed the purple puddle on marble JD's dare to the protesters, the hush when she signed. "We priced it in courage," she whispered. "Courage polls poorly," Marquez said. Regret flickered across his features. "But you might salvage it with a staging clause. Data still drops quarterly, but an independent data watchdog issues pre-release context notes stem the panic." "Truth with training wheels," she mused. "JD will hate it. He'll compromise if it keeps his sunset." She stared at the skyline, a sawtooth of cranes and monuments. Somewhere beyond, sirens wailed either celebration or crisis. In this town, they often sounded the same. "Draft it," she ordered. While power-stitched late-night revisions, Georgetown's campus basked in a rare after-storm hush. Emily Brooks sat on the library steps, uploading the last footage, protesters reading clauses aloud under dripping chandeliers. Her video caption read, "Persuasion beats paint." View count vaulted past 500K in minutes. In dorm lounges, nationwide students balanced finals with legislative jargon trading, Googled definitions of sunset clause and appropriation holdback. Forum threads bloomed. Could we replicate this at our state house? Civil hackathons, crowd law kits. Yet elsewhere, darker seeds sprouted. A viral clip. Harris shaking JD's hand, looped in attack ads slapped together by midnight operatives. Camera 1, Harris sides with Vance to spend billions with no oversight. Flip the narrative, different pack. Camera 2, Vance surrenders to big government liberals. The same handshake, 2 righteous betrayals. Linda West finally filed her long-form piece for the Sunday edition. Her editor texted one-line leave room for backlash follow-up. She folded her MacBook and listened to synthesized voicemails, radio shows, courting her haters, labeling her a shill, her grandmother leaving a proud tear-soaked blessing in Vietnamese. The day felt too large for one body to absorb. Just after 2 a.m., JD's office lights burned on. Staffers had crashed on couches draft in version 23. JD alone remained upright, jacket off, tie loose. He scribbled a margin note beside the transparency clause. If we dilute now, we teach cynics timing always wins. Then he stared at it until the ink blurred. He thought of steelworkers who'd texted finally numbers talk for us. Thought of Dylan printing hope onto fridge paper. Thought of Harris pen poised, choosing legacy over safety. He dialed her private line. She answered on ring 2, voice graveled. Couldn't sleep either. Not while maths hostage to optics, he said. Silence padded the line. Digital rain between two tired defenders. Then she told him about Marquez's watchdog compromise. JD's instinct bristled, but exhaustion gentled his tone. If watchdog means independent, unfiltered, maybe. Budget pledged from GAO board, confirmed by both chambers, she said. Numbers drop. Watchdog publishes volatility brief within an hour, same quarter transparency, less market shock. JD paced, boots thudding marble underfoot. He remembered Margaret's red minus signs. Maybe this pressure valve held the line without snapping it. We still freeze agency funds for missing data. Non-negotiable, she answered. And the sunset stays. It stays. Agreement settled, like rain pooling in streetlight quiet, reflective, inevitable. They set a 9 a.m. press point to announce the refinement before detractors defined it first. JD hung up muscles, uncoiling. He stepped onto the balcony. Dawn's first smear of lavender breached the horizon. The city looked freshly forged steam rising from its avenues. He whispered to no one, or maybe to the ghost of his steel town past, "Hold, damn you! Hold just once!" Below, delivery trucks rumbled. Newspapers thudded onto stoops, and somewhere a union shift whistle sang. The note cut crisp through humid air, a promise that work still waited, that numbers still mattered, and that by the time kettles whistled in kitchens from Youngstown to Georgetown, the fight for transparent daylight would begin anew. The morning press point unfolded in the Senate's small media amphitheater, a half-moon of bright lights and unforgiving lenses. JD Vance arrived first. Eyes red-rimmed, but clear, clutching a blue folder stamped Rev 24. 30 seconds later, Kamala Harris stepped beside him, jacket the same navy as yesterday, posture squared by 4 uninterrupted hours of sleep. The room's chatter dipped into a hush threaded with camera clicks. "Good morning," Harris began, her voice firm but not martial. "Overnight, our teams refined the transparency framework to protect both working families and economic stability." JD took the baton. Clause 6 now establishes an independent labor data watchdog, funded through GAO, confirmed by bipartisan supermajority, barred from receiving executive directives. He tapped the folder. If an agency misses the quarterly release, funds freeze. If the watchdog's 1-hour context brief is tampered with, funds freeze. Sunlight stays lethal. A reporter shouted, "Senator critics call that toothless if markets still tank." JD answered, "Pain from truth heals. Pain from lies festers. We've chosen healing." Harris added, "Markets fear uncertainty more than honesty. Predictable transparency with expert briefs is the antidote." A rare moment, 2 ideological poles handing each other rhetorical stepping stones. Yet outside the Hart building, a forest of placards bristled. Some read, "Pass it now," others, "No sunset, no panic," and a few brandished by partisan diehards, simply traitors. Mark Taylor, temporarily reassigned to Capitol Police Detail, tracked the factions. He clocked spin-off pods of agitators, live-streaming provocations, each hoping for a shove that would convert into viral proof of oppression. His earpiece crackled. "Maintain buffer. No riot gear unless contact escalates." Inside, Harris closed the presser with a nod to the future. The draft transmits at 11. Committee markup at 4. We invite every skeptic to propose constructive edits. JD sealed it. We'll read them, live stream the markup, and stamp timecodes on every deletion. The internet forgets nothing. Flashes strobed. Reporters scattered. 11:07 a.m. Help committee servers pinged as the MWA Transparency Revision 1 uploaded. Within minutes, crowdsourced analysts dissected each line on GitHub clones, highlighting potential loopholes. A data scientist in Seattle flagged wording that allowed agencies to reschedule releases if significant systemic disruption occurred. Twitter lit, define systemic. The clause innocuous at 2 a.m. now looked like a hidden trapdoor. At 12:15, JD's policy aide Sarah Cole barged into his office. Senator, the Internet's torching Section 4C. JD scanned the highlighted tweets, cursed under his breath, and rang Harris. Your counsel slipped an earthquake clause. Harris, mid-lunch of carrot sticks she hadn't meant to eat, frowned. That language predates last night. We'll tighten act of God only. They agreed to amend before markup. Social media gave grudging nods, transparency about transparency. But another flank opened. Business channels broadcast urgent scrolls. Industrial index down 2% on quarterly data worry. Pundits hissed, see panic already. On Q House, moderates began leaking concerns. Margaret O'Neill texted JD minus signs gaining. He pocketed the phone jaw stone. 3:42 p.m. Senate hearing room. Wood paneling, rows of bottled water, and a C-SPAN boom mic hanging like a guillotine. The markup clocked record live stream viewers 120K and rising. JD and Harris sat at opposite ends, still collaborators, but now negotiators across mahogany. First Skirmish Representative Donnelly offered Amendment 12 striking the sunset clause. Fiscal cliff hostage. JD shot up. Hostage to honesty, yes. He enumerated factory closures referencing the leak that sparked the movement. Donnelly countered with stock market graphs. Harris, poised as fulcrum, proposed a compromise. Sunset stays, but a 2-year review panel may adjust cadence if volatility exceeds 5% quarter over quarter. JD's aides urged no, but JD, reading faces in the dais minus signs swaying, nodded once. The amendment failed, compromise logged. Linda West typed like a court stenographer on caffeine. Her sidebar headline grew, Sunset survives but timer now guarded by review panel. Second Skirmish lobbyists whispered to lawmakers, floating an 18-month implementation delay. Miguel Rosas, seated in the public gallery, erupted, delays kill jobs, order banged, but the moment landed on every highlight reel. Ariana tweeted, delay equals denial. Public pressure spiked, delay amendment withdrawn. Outside, protest drums thumped. Mark Taylor reported a flare of pushing. He diffused with measured calm, quoting JD's earlier speech, paint dries. Numbers don't. The phrase unexpected from a cop cooled tempers long enough for the markup to continue. 5:11 p.m. final roll call. The revised Midwest Workforce Act, sunset intact watchdog armed God clause, narrowed past committee 15-7. O'Neill's eyes shone. JD exhaled. Harris allowed herself half a smile. Cameras captured unrivaled rarity applause, rippling from staff tables to public gallery. Even a few lobbyists clapped, perhaps out of relief that a train had left the station after decades of idle track. But victory tasted metallic. In corridors, aides warned of a House gauntlet and an industry blitz. At 6 p.m. sharp, a statement hit inboxes from the Coalition for Responsible Markets. Data volatility threatens pensions. Workforce Act reckless urges Senate reconsideration. JD read it under fluorescent hum, muttered predictable and scribbled, publish rebuttal tonight, on a sticky note. Night settled again. But tonight the city's pulse felt different, anticipatory, as though monuments held breath. JD walked down East Capitol Street alone, coat collar turned up, rain left over in gutters. A group of electricians in muddy boots recognized him. One tooth gap wide gave a thumbs up. Quarterly truth or bust, Senator JD smiled, felt weight shift from his shoulders to shared ground. Across town, Harris phoned her mother. As she spoke of watchdog boards and data briefs, she realized they'd done something rare, fused policy with immediacy. Her mother laughed softly. You sound tired, but your voice is taller. Social feeds calmed to a simmer of bar charts and memes. The handshake photo now captioned maybe. Not victory, not betrayal, just the cautious hope of a republic daring to trust itself with raw numbers. Past midnight, JD opened his fridge in the row house basement apartment he still kept for symbolism. Beside leftover Thai, he tacked a photocopy of the bill like his mum's fridge. He stared at the sunset clause, 32 words ready to redraw the map between power and people. Outside the Capitol dome glowed a lighthouse or a surveillance eye, depending on who you asked. He whispered to the clause as if to a child about to brave the playground hold. Then he killed the kitchen light and let the document glow in refrigerator blue, stubborn and bright until dawn. Dawn on Capitol Hill smelled of wet magnolia and diesel. By 7 a.m., the Midwest Workforce Act rested in the Senate scheduler's inbox, slotted for a floor date the following week, an unthinkable sprint. JD Vance's phone lit with congratulations and warnings in equal measure, every buzz a tug of possibility or peril. Meanwhile, across the country, the bill's clauses were no longer sterile lines on government parchment. They had germinated into kitchen table arguments, sermon bulletins, plant floor podcasts. In Toledo, a morning AM host opened with "Transparency used to be a slogan. Today it has teeth sharp enough to bite the Bureau of Labor Statistics." In Queens, an economics TikToker annotated the watchdog provision with neon arrows and a 30-second rap. #Numbers. Don't lie climbed into national trends, but so did Darren Stockshock, the trading community's counter-anthem. At 8:12 a.m., a Bloomberg alert pierced the optimism. Equities dip again on looming data dump regime. Analysts cite MWA uncertainty. Cable studios invited talking heads who spoke in urgent cadence about forced volatility. A Chiron screamed, "Transparency tremor." Market allergy to change began writing its own narrative before Congress could hold the pen. JD arrived at Fox 8 Cleveland's remote truck parked outside the Russell Building for a quick hometown hit. Host Valerie Dean pressed Senator retirees watching this channel fear their pensions will yo-yo every quarter. "What's your guarantee?" JD let breath gather behind his sternum. Valerie, truth is like the dentist, unpleasant in short bursts, deadly if you avoid it. Our watchdog briefs give context, so numbers don't blindside Wall Street or Main Street. Off camera, a producer mouthed dentist analogy bold. The interview trended within an hour. But inside the House side of the Capitol, a different storm brewed. Majority Whip Leonard Koch convened a breakfast caucus stacked with skeptical centrists and industry-leaning freshmen. On a mahogany credenza sat a single-prop yesterday's market graph tattooed with angry red bars. Koch stabbed it. "This bill delivers campaign ads to the opposition. They tanked your 401k for Rust Belt theatrics." Murmurs of agreement. A path formed demand, stripping the sunset or stall the bill until after mid-terms. The whip-counted heads' lips pursed. Kamala Harris received the intel over encrypted text as she exited a radio studio. Ava Singh's message read, "House Whip mobilizing. They'll weaponize volatility." Harris typed back, "Engage pensions angle. Office of Actuary can model risk mitigation. Meet me 11 a.m. Old Senate Chamber. Harris, J.D. O'Neill, and Treasury Undersecretary Nora Katz huddled beneath frescoed eagles. Katz deployed graphs showing historical precedent transparency shocks in 76 and 009 smoothed within 2 cycles when paired with explanatory releases. Volatility decays as markets learn signal frequency, she concluded. Harris turned to J.D. "We need this chart in every moderate's inbox before close of business." "Add flesh," J.D. said. "Translate percentiles to paycheck lines. How many dollars lost? How many regained post-learning curve?" Nora nodded, flipping her stylus by 2 p.m. Yet even data armor could crack under emotional artillery. At noon, an ad blitz hit social feeds, slick 15-second spots of seniors watching stock tickers plunge in slow motion. Voiceover, "Tell Washington. Don't experiment with our retirement." The ad's funding source traced to a dark money group linked to commodity futures. Within an hour, senators' phones flooded with calls. Miguel Rosas caught the ad while fixing a carburetor in his motel parking lot. His union had sent him to D.C. as grassroots muscle. Rage coiled. He called Ariana, now unofficial press wrangler for citizen stakeholders. "They're scaring old folks," he said. Ariana, hunched over a Chromebook in the Dirksen cafeteria, answered, "Then we count a story." She fired up a Zoom room dubbed Truth Over Fear and invited retirees from Lordstown who'd survived far worse than data honesty. By 4 p.m., A compilation video, grandmothers in union jackets saying, "We can handle numbers, just stop hiding them," hit Facebook, racking shares in battleground suburbs. 3:55 p.m. House Rotunda. JD and Harris held an impromptu presser flanked by those same retirees. Cameras caught wrinkled hands gripping stat sheets, living proof against the panic narrative. JD spoke plainly. These folks buried friends after plants closed overnight. They can stomach quarterly truth just fine. A retiree named Dolores winked at the lens. "Baby, I raised 5 kids on strike pay. Bring on your spreadsheets." Across the street, Leonard Koch watched on mute, jaw tightening. His staffer whispered, public sympathy pivoting. He pivoted back, approved a memo to committee chairs, encouraging targeted technical objections if sunset survival seemed inevitable. That evening, the technical objections arrived like precision-guided missiles. Email subject lines: access to capital impact study need, clear definition of labor data, clarify GAO funding source. Each required answers before Rules Committee would calendar the bill. Bureaucratic molasses reasserted itself. JD's war room tackled the salvo. Dylan manned Slack-funneling crowdsourced responses from professors and coders. Ariana drafted FAQ answers in plain language. Zainab translated them into Spanish and Arabic by midnight. Miguel called in a favor from a pension actuary friend to validate Treasury's curve. Within hours, the objections met bullet point answers, but sleepless eyes flicked to the calendar delay was its own victory for opponents. Amid the grind, a quieter arc unfolded. Emily Brooks, reviewing unused footage, noticed the protester who had dropped the paint balloon Janelle Price, community college student from West Virginia. Emily messaged, asking why she'd come. Janelle answered, "I was tired of decisions made out of reach. Turns out the reach got shorter." Emily posted the interview caption, "When dissent joins the table." It gained modest traction, evidence of wounds mending under shared authorship. By 2 a.m., Capitol janitors buffed floors outside JD's office, where policy aides lay across chairs like crash test dummies. JD drafted a memo to every undecided House member. Subject: the cost of concealed truth. Bullet 1, 1976 revision to labor transparency preceded 6% GDP expansion. Bullet 2, hidden data did not save Steel Valley. Openness might have prepared it. Bullet 3, sunset clause automates accountability. Your constituents like accountability. Ask, vote yes on first reading. Let facts breathe. He signed it for the welders, the nail salon owners, and anyone who pays late fees on optimism. Across the city, Harris penned her own to the Progressive Caucus, arguing data. Sunlight would empower policy battles on wage equity. 2 letters, 2 ideologies, 1 hinge point. At sunrise, both missives left their respective servers. The Capitol dome glowed salmon pink against thinning clouds, the city yawning awake for another day of parliamentary siege. Beneath the dome, stacks of letters, fact sheets and stories of people who refused silence waited on desks like unopened seeds. Whether they would sprout or wither depended on vote tallies still fluid as morning fog. JD paused on the east steps, breathing in damp stone and magnolia. He pictured the refrigerator in Middletown, Ohio, that had never known legislation until now. He imagined thousands more joining it, magnets snapping truth to steel. A small, tired smile creased his face. "Hold," he whispered again to the awakening city. And somewhere inside, the numbers waited, unsentimental, unafraid, ready to step into daylight the moment the gavel dared grant them permission. A faint scent of printer toner floated through the marble corridors like battlefield smoke. Thursday, 9 a.m. Rules Committee hearing room, last choke point before the Midwest Workforce Act could reach the House floor. Every chair was claimed, every paper cup of coffee trembling on slim wooden rails. Leonard Koch opened proceedings with the flat tone of a man determined to unmake momentum. "We will examine whether quarterly data dumps constitute a material threat to economic stability." The phrase data dump splashed across reporters' notepads, a subtle sabotage framing transparency as trash. JD Vance sat flanked by Dolores the retiree and Miguel in his UAW jacket. Kamala Harris, invited as executive witness, occupied the opposite witness table, separated by an aisle, but not by purpose. They exchanged a nod hold. First called Dr. Gordon Frey, chief economist for a major brokerage. He waved a color-coded slide red spikes tracking market dips around past unexpected labor numbers. Gentlemen, he intoned, we risk panic every 90 days. JD scribbled on a yellow pad. Fear in a suit. When his turn to question came, he leaned in. Dr. Fry, what caused more damage surprise layoffs, or the numbers that reported them? Frey faltered. The room caught the hitch. Cameras zoomed. Harris followed. Doctor, can markets adapt to regular, predictable transparency? Frey muttered yes with proper hedging. She pivoted. Thank you. That's the entire thesis of Section 6. A ripple of chuckles cracked Coke's grim face. Next witness, 28-year-old Janelle Price, the former paint balloon protester, now hair still tinted lavender from an ill-fated dye attempt. Emily Brooks had arranged her testimony. Janelle faced the committee, voice soft but steady. I showed up angry because I thought no one heard us. They let me read the bill line by line. Turns out democracy had an empty seat with my name on it. Leaving that seat empty is the real risk. The committee room stilled. Even Coke wrote something in the margin, maybe opponent, maybe anecdote, no one knew. But sabotage rarely sleeps. Midway through hearing aids' phones lit with push alerts, anonymous leak watchdog board candidate tied to defunct crypto exchange scandal. Screenshots of a LinkedIn profile flooded Twitter. Trolls tagged Jiao watchdog gone bad. Nora Katz, watching from gallery paled listed candidate, was her first pick. JD's chief of staff. Sarah raced a whisper down the row, unverified smear photo, 5 years old, name misspelled. JD texted Harris mid-hearing. Fake, Harris responded, working. Within 10 minutes, Treasury's press desk pushed proof the crypto exec and nominee were two different women. Linda West tweeted the timeline in real-time caption, false flag fizzles in 10 minutes. Transparency inoculates. Hashtag under numbers. Don't lie ticked upward again. Meanwhile, Coke unveiled his Ace Amendment 47, a protective delay shifting the first transparency release to January after the midterms. He presented it like a reasonable umbrella against economic drizzle. JD requested the floor. Chairman, that's not a delay. That's a muzzle time to elections. He lifted Dolores's pension statement stamped overdue fee. Truth isn't partisan, but calendars can be. Harris added voice tune to prosecutorial precision. Delaying truth to protect incumbents is what voters reject. Progressive members clapped. A few centrists winced. Votes on Amendment 47 began. Lights on the tally board flickered a row of tentative green and red. Two centrists hesitated. Ariana text blasted their district's local stations with Janelle's seat at the table quote. Constituents flooded reps' inboxes within seconds. Final tally amendment failed 7-6. Coke's jaw set. Outside, Mark Taylor monitored a new threat, a rolling billboard circling the Capitol flashing JD Vance data bomb. Drivers snapped photos, half amused, half alarmed. Mark logged license plates traced to a pack front cash trail already under FEC complaint. Back inside, the hearing lurched to closing statements. Coke warned of unseen repercussions. JD answered, "We've lived the repercussions, bankruptcies filed in silence." Harris closed with sunlight drives mold to the corners. That's why corners scream. Rules Committee recessed to vote on final rule for floor debate. 30 tense minutes later, Clark announced rule passes 8-5. Applause burst. Coke stormed out, tie suddenly too tight. The hallway erupted into dueling scrums. JD and Harris jointly faced microphones. Next stop floor vote, JD said. We welcome every amendment in daylight, Harris added. Dolores stood behind them, pension statement held high like a torch. But night held another twist. At 8 p.m., after networks aired compilation highlights, stock futures wobbled again. Cable pundits resurrected apocalypse talk. On cue, Coke's office leaked rumors of a discharge petition to yank the bill. Twitter trench warfare resumed. JD convened a video town hall from his apartment kitchen, light harsh on the fridge-mounted bill. 30,000 watched live. He explained the watchdog again, the 1-hour brief, the voluntary investor tool Treasury had mocked up that morning. He finished panic profit speculators. Calm belongs to all of us. Choose calm. Comments scrolled. Across town, Harris hosted a TikTok live with Ariana and Zainab, translating subtitles. She answered questions at lightning pace, even the snarky ones. Clip of her saying, "Numbers aren't red or blue. Their math hit 2 million views before bedtime." In late-night offices, undecided House members noted constituent email ratios shifting 60-40 toward yes. Lobbyists upped retainers. At 2 a.m., JD received a call from Senator O'Neill. House odds swung. Koch may bargain for cosmetic tweak define systemic disruption as events exceeding 6-state impact. JD exhaled. 6 states is broad but measurable. I can live with it if release within 2 weeks follows. O'Neill promised to float the offer. He texted Harris. The reply came instantly agreed if Watchdog certifies scope. Deals sketched in 5 lines, unsentimental like the numbers they defended. JD looked again at the fridge bill edges curling. He pressed fresh magnets a gear and a tiny crucifix holding it flatter. Out the window, the dome shimmered gold. The city did not yet sleep, but for the first time, JD sensed fatigue settling on the opposition like bankers after a long audit. He whispered no longer plea but command to the sheet of legislative steel. Almost there. Hold. Beyond the glass, the first star of dawn winked like a cursor on a blank page, ready for whatever the Republic would type next. Sunlight struck the Capitol's white dome, the way a match finds tinder sudden, bright and dangerous to anyone hiding in the shadows. Friday was floor vote day. Inside the Rayburn cafeteria, junior staffers whispered odds like bookmakers at a clandestine track, 218. 222 if Payne flips. Donut glaze hardened untouched, while C-SPAN toggled between talking head portent and the House roll call screen, still blank, still chilling. At 10 a.m., JD Vance and Kamala Harris stepped through the South Atrium security arch within the same half-second, an accidental choreography that set smartphones buzzing. A reporter called Senator have the 6-state clause votes. JD kept walking. Harris answered without breaking stride, "Math usually wins." 3 words, trending within minutes. The final lobby push. Leonard Koch commandeered a side gallery, marshalling undecided centrists and corporate emissaries. His new talking point printed in 48-point font, Quarterly Chaos Act. He brandished the latest futures dip minus 0.8% like a bayonet. But Treasury Undersecretary Nora Katz circulated her own sheet. Past transparency shocks recover within 19 trading days on average. 2 stacks of paper dueled in anxious hands. Meanwhile, Ariana Nguyen, Zainab Al-Hadi and Miguel Rosas patrolled hallways wearing neon pins shaped like QR codes. Lobbyists scoffed until they saw interns scan and pull up the full bill with 5 click-through Mythbuster cards. Information guerrilla warfare. Noon, the floor debate speaker's gavel thud echoing through marble ribs. C-SPAN view widened to capture 435 seats, many already festooned with placards. Data freeze jobs opposite Save Our 401k. Amendments commenced. Amendment 62, 6-state disruption definition. Offered by a Maryland moderate. JD rose in support after Koch framed it as modest guardrail. Guardrail, yes, JD agreed, but not a detour. He added a surgical sentence. Release must occur within 2 weeks or Watchdog releases preliminary figures. Harris signaled thumbs up from Democratic front row. Amendment adopted 267-162. Amendment 71, remove auto-freeze of agency funds, crafted overnight by Finance Committee hawks. Harris took the mic, voice a velvet hammer. Fiscal accountability, without a trigger, is a souvenir, not a safeguard. Vote failed by 11. Linda West watched from the press balcony, fingers stuttering over keys, line after line guillotine of Sunshine Spare's few loopholes. Her editor DM'd, "Need personal angle." She scanned the floor, found it Janelle Price sitting in public gallery, in one hand the final bill in the other, the crimson-blue marble she'd pocketed from her burst paint balloon. A symbol forged from protester policy. Linda snapped the shot. 3:04 p.m. The roll call electronic names flashed green or red. At 2:15-2:14 the chamber stilled. 5 votes remained. JD clasped the bench rail knuckles bone white. Payne N.J. Green, Castor F.L. Green, Ruiz C.A. Green. 218 reached cheers erupted on the progressive aisle. A groan rippled through Koch's block. Still 2 votes outstanding. Monroe UT unexpected Green. The gallery gasped. Later he'd cite constituent email storm linking hidden data to layoffs at a local aluminum mill. Maddox TX, last to appear on screen, paused, then read. The final tally, 222 yay, 2113 nay. Gavel slammed. The chamber fractured into applause and recrimination. JD exhaled like a forge bellows, shoulders sagging. Harris closed her eyes, a private benediction to every aid protester and spreadsheet that carried them here. Hallway pandemonium. Microphones sprouted from cables, reporters shouting. JD and Harris approached together again, that reluctant pas de deux now etched into history. JD spoke first. Today Congress chose daylight. Harris added, we proved truth can be bipartisan currency. A journalist barked, Madam Vice President, stock market down again, regret. She answered, markets breathe. Democracies must too. Exhale. Quote ricocheted across tickers before traders could sip burnt Starbucks. The president's Penn West Wing cameras captured the signing at 7 p.m. President Edwards, flanked by Flinty O'Neill and beaming Treasury staff, uncapped a black roller and etched signature on parchment. Workers will not wait months to learn their fate, he said, handing the pen to Dolores, who'd been flown in at Harris's insistence. Dolores held it like an heirloom musket. Immediate shockwaves. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tweeted, we are prepared to meet new transparency timelines. Replies filled with confetti and skepticism in equal measure. NASDAQ closed down 1.2%, then clawed back half in after hours when watchdog board nominations, none linked to crypto, were announced. University listservs exploded. Georgetown Playbook crowd law starter kit template for QR pin lobbying. Opposition counter-maneuver. At 10 p.m., Koch launched an expedited court challenge, claiming the auto freeze violates the Anti-Deficiency Act. Twitter's legal pundits waged midnight war. JD's counsel filed a motion to dismiss before dawn. The fight shifted from marble to courtroom tile, but for now, the law stood. A quiet moment. Under sputtering street lamps at the end of East Capitol Street, JD and Harris met one last time. No cameras. Rain threatened again, humid with cherry blossom decay. How long before they gut it, JD asked. Harris shrugged. Maybe never. Sunlight's sticky once it coats you. He offered a tired smile. Thanks for signing the 6-state compromise. She returned it. Thanks for refusing the 18-month delay. They shook hands, not for the cameras this time, but because a bridge once walked together is hard to burn. As Harris's sedan pulled away, JD heard distant horns, motorists celebrating or cursing, impossible to tell. He looked up at the dome, bathed now in pure white floodlight. Too bright to hide cracks, bright enough to reveal scaffolding if it ever failed. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo, and texted it to Dylan Line Held. The reply came with a selfie mom in robe fridge, behind her Bill laminated sunrise gleaming off plastic. JD slipped the phone away. Magnolia petals drifted across the sidewalk like spent confetti. Numbers, unapologetic and unspun, would debut in 90 days. Somewhere in the hills of Ohio and in nail salons, classrooms, union halls and trading floors, people would read them raw, decide for themselves, and maybe, just maybe, believe that if truth could reach the ledger, it might one day reach every other dark corner too. 91 days later, an August morning thick with cicada buzz, America braced for its first mandatory Labor Day to sunrise. Cable countdown clocks mimicked New Year's Eve. Lower thirds blared T00500 to truth drop. On the roof of the new independent Labor data, watchdog technicians in hard hats aligned a dish that would beam the files to every public mirror. Inside a 6-member board, 2 Labor, 2 business, 1 academic, 1 student, Ariana Nguyen badge, now reading Director Civic Outreach, huddled over laptops glowing 5:59 a.m. JD Vance watched from a quiet office in Middletown's public library, Mother and Dylan on folding chairs behind him. Kamala Harris tuned in from a union hall in Gary, Indiana, flanked by steelworkers who had sworn they wouldn't believe numbers until they saw them with their own eyes. Treasury's Nora Katz stood in CNBC's studio, ready to deliver the one-hour context brief. At exactly 06:00 GMT5, the watchdog site flashed green. Download links proliferated faster than memes. Tens of thousands opened the same spreadsheet columns of employment, wage growth, sectoral churn, raw, unvarnished 3 clicks from bureau servers to living room phones. A second timer began 59:59, context brief pending, reminding everyone they were allowed to look before experts spoke. First reactions. Wall Street Pulse Discord numbers uglier than consensus futures dip, 0.7%. Reddit, blue collar. My county shows 800 hires at the battery plant, first positive in years. TikTok finance guru chart shark post transparency discount already priced. Chill. 15 minutes in, Leonard Koch appeared on Fox Business claiming reckless data chaos, but the Chiron beneath him ran live poll results. 63% of viewers say, glad to see real numbers. Koch's brow twitched, not a glitch, a verdict. The context brief. At 07:00 sharp, Nora Katz stepped to a digital map glimmering behind CNBC's desk. She compared auto-corrected forecasts with actuals, highlighted a transitory spike in part-time retail, and ended with a sentence destined for business school case studies. Markets crave certainty. Today, certainty is spelled CSV. Dow futures halved their loss within minutes. By closing bell, the index finished down just 0.18%, then swung positive in after hours. Traders muttered, guess quarterly honesty is the new normal. Ground truth echoes. In Dayton, Miguel Rosas addressed a parking lot rally of machinists. No more rumors, look at line 48C, column J, we're hiring. He held a printout overhead like a scout brandishing proof of promised land. Cheers drowned interstate hum. On Georgetown's quad, Professor Coleman retired from MC duties, now teaching rapid response governance, live-streamed a watch party. Students pinned sticky notes to a giant board, data I care about, opioid relapse counts, childcare costs, veteran job placement. Emily Brooks filmed it, captioned day 1 of The Culture of Daylight. But every dawn casts shadows. At 8:12 a.m., a federal district judge responding to Koch's anti-deficiency suit issued a temporary hearing date. Headlines blipped. Court cloud trended. JD read the alert, heart hitching. Mum squeezed his shoulder. They can sue the son, honey. Won't stop mourning. Inside the watchdog HQ, Ariana fielded press. If the rule goes down, will you still publish? She smiled, QR pin glinting. Truth's a habit now. Hard to quit. Mid-morning. The Gladiator hearing emergency telearguments streamed at 11 a.m. Koch's counsel called the auto-freeze executive coercion. JD's side invoked Congress's power of the purse and ingeniously played clips of retirees like Dolores demanding accountability. Judge Watkins, former Army JAG, asked one lethal question. Does transparency burden the Treasury or merely embarrass it? Counsel stammered. By 1 p.m., the injunction was denied. Tweet storms erupted. Afternoon ripples. State treasurers requested early access APIs, planning local dashboards. A California edtech firm announced Curriculum Data Civics 101. Street vendors outside the Capitol sold T-shirts quarterly truther. That evening, Harris convened a roundtable in Gary. JD joined by Hollowall from Ohio. A 19-year-old apprentice welder named Simone asked, now that numbers talk, what's next? JD answered, we build louder microphones, housing starts, broadband gaps, real wage purchasing power. Harris added, transparency isn't a ceiling, it's a floor we finally poured. Simone raised her phone screen showing watchdog site. Looks like concrete to me. The room laughed, the laugh of people who'd spent decades as punchlines. Late night Capitol. Linda West prowled hallways hunting fallout quotes, but found unexpected calm. Even previously hostile staffers admitted relief at no catastrophic crash. She filed her piece, Day 1, Data Hangover Mild, Democracy Eyes Second Round. Editor replied with a rare single-word email, hopeful. On the Capitol steps, JD met Harris beneath floodlit columns. Rain threatened again, but only a breeze brushed flags. They shared 10 silent seconds watching cleaning crews swap July's bunting for September's. JD spoke first. "Storm didn't knock us." Harris glanced skyward. "Next one will test different beams. Then we reinforce." She smiled, exhaustion softened by purpose. "See you in 89 days." They parted without ceremony habit now. In Middletown, JD returned to his mother's house. The laminator had worked overtime, fridge displayed today's raw data, yesterday's signing photo, and a paper dove Dylan folded from Coke's glossy quarterly chaos flyer. Symbolic recycling. Before bed, JD scrolled social feeds jokes about Nush CSV Friday's analysts predicting fewer shock headlines, a photo of Janelle's crimson blue marble under the Watchdog logo with caption, "From mess to metric." He locked the phone, eyes damp. He whispered, not a command, not a prayer, just a statement of fact to the darkened kitchen line held. Sun's up. Beyond the window, street lamps flickered off one by one, conceding their night shift to a dawn that no longer needed permission to reveal what shadows tried to keep. 76 days after the inaugural truth drop, something unexpected happened. The markets hardly noticed the second one. Futures wobbled 0.1%, corrected within an hour, and pundits' hunting calamity found only shrugs. Bloomberg's anchor summed it up with a sigh. "Turns out transparency is boring once you're used to it. Yet boredom," JD Vance discovered, could be revolutionary. The global echo. In Brussels, the European Commission cited the Midwest Workforce Act while debating its own Labour Clarity Directive. In Seoul, reformist lawmakers pinned QR-shaped badges to lapels. The Korean press nicknamed them Arianas. An Indian state uploaded district-level job churn for the first time, tagging tweets Rajshi Sesvi Satyagraha Truth through spreadsheets. Miguel Rosas watched these ripples from an Ohio diner TV, biting into a cheesesteak. He texted JD World Copy's Rust Belt. "Didn't see that coming." JD replied with a gif of dominoes, opposition's new tactic. Leonard Coke was not finished. If panic couldn't slay the law, perhaps apathy could. His caucus drafted the Simplification and Efficiency Act, a 400-page omnibus that, buried on page 312, shifted watchdog funding to annual appropriation. One missed budget vote, and the truth pipeline would starve. The maneuver leaked at 2 a.m., thanks to a bleary intern who posted a screenshot to a policy Discord. Emily Brooks caught it before caffeine. By sunup, Sparks page 312 trended. Memes of an empty Excel cell captioned, "What Coke wants you to know." Dolores, now minor celebrity, recorded a 15-second reel from her kitchen. They can't stomach raw data, so they'll unplug the fridge. Within hours, inboxes of appropriations members clogged. Ariana, now fluent in Hill scheduling software, arranged a public hearing. Cameras captured Rosie, a Detroit robotics apprentice, holding a signed spreadsheet, or it didn't happen. The line snaked around Longworth. Staffers had to read testimony through crackling bullhorns in the hallway. Page 312 died in subcommittee. Coke slammed a door so hard a portrait rattled. Harris and the Sunbeam Doctrine. Vice President Harris traveled to Kansas City to unveil a White House memo christening the policy spillover, the Sunbeam Doctrine, regular machine-readable disclosure as prerequisite for credible democracy. Critics groaned at the branding, but agencies quietly began reviewing their own data embargoes. Even the Pentagon floated, releasing quarterly veteran re-entry statistics redacted but unheard of 6 months earlier. At the announcement's edge, JD lingered off camera, feeling both proud and wary. Afterward, Harris approached, lowering her voice. "Sunlight mission's overtaken us. You ready to chase the beam?" "Depends where it lands next," he said. "Healthcare pricing," she replied. "If we expose hospital markups, we'll need thicker armor." He gave a tight grin. "Sharpen the welders' torches." The personal cost. But transparency carried quieter tolls. A hedge fund ran attack ads in JD's district blaming quarterly drops for fleeting portfolio dips. A local talk radio host called him Senator Spreadsheet, painting honesty as elitism. Harris, meanwhile, faced murmurs that she'd gifted JD a bipartisan halo ahead of her own 2028 ambitions. Both learned that sunshine can scorch. Late one October evening, JD's mother phoned, voice pinched. Letters came, nasty ones. "Your son killed my retirement." JD closed his laptop on a new draft bill, forehead to glass. "Mom, the market's up 12% since June. I know facts, honey. They know feelings. He almost offered to hire security, then remembered she'd survived foreclosure chemo and county politics. She told him to worry about votes, not mail. Still, he mailed an extra deadbolt next day. A crack appears. 3 months later, Watchdog board member Alex Monroe, the business rep, resigned, citing family reasons. Politico discovered texts showing he'd been pressured by industry donors to slow the drip. The board scrambled. Ariana scheduled emergency livestream explaining succession bylaws. Markets yawned. The pipeline kept flowing. But JD saw the larger warning sunlight systems could be attacked 1 pixel at a time. He met Harris in a Senate snack alcove, fluorescent humming. They'll pick off Guardians till the gate's unmanned. She popped her peanut eyes narrowed. Then we widen the guard tower regional watchdog nodes rotating memberships. Crowdsourced the Cokes of the world will plant sleepers. Maybe she said smile thin. But truth's a vaccine. Sleepers must reveal data. That's their job description. JD laughed despite exhaustion. Weaponize honesty against saboteurs. I could get used to that. The second anniversary year one closed with job growth up 1.4% in the tri-state wage transparency bills, in 9 legislatures and still alive watchdog funding. Georgetown hosted a reunion panel, Coleman moderating, now famous for coining hackathon governance. Janelle, wearing a purple marble necklace, told a packed hall, if rage can morph into rows and columns, any protest can pivot to policy. Students asked JD what kept him awake these days. He answered, the fear that we'll decide sunlight's too bright and reach for curtains again. He paused, scanning faces. So every 90 days, open the blinds. Even if you hate the view, at least you're not stumbling in the dark. Harris' last speaker lifted a clear glass instead of a gavel. To stubborn numbers she toasted. May they embarrass us into action and humble us into truth. Applause surged, not thunderous like the first summit, but sustained like rain that soaks deep. Epilogue of the segment. That night, JD returned to Middletown for the annual steel plant reunion cookout. Beneath string lights, grease smoke, and Tom Petty covers welders he hadn't seen since graduation clapped him on the back. One handed him a pocket-sized laminated table quarterly labor snapshot, Ohio Q3 Year 1. Keep it honest, Senator, the man said. We'll be reading. JD slid the card next to his heart, suddenly heavier than campaign pins. He glanced at the sky autumn constellations, familiar, unfazed by new metrics. Yet he felt the country's axis imperceptibly, irrevocably tilted toward accountability. The line had held, and now it was stretching inch by inch into places darkness once claimed eternal. He raised a foam cup of generic cola, whispering the phrase that had become his quiet creed. Onward, sunbeam. 5 years later, the phrase quarterly truth had drifted into everyday speech. The way Wi-Fi once had an invisible service everyone expected, seldom praised, and only noticed when it faltered. Grocery clerks checked cost of living widgets on phones that refreshed with every release. Small-town mayors scrolled county hiring rates before council meetings. Pension ads bragged, built for the Sunbeam era. The numbers had become background music, steady, occasionally discordant, but impossible to shut off. The last steel girder. On a crisp March morning in Youngstown, the skeleton of a new electric arc furnace shimmered beneath cranes. A banner read, groundbreaking, funded by MWA cap credits. JD Vance stood beside Miguel Rosas and Ariana Nguyen, all in hard hats bearing the Watchdog logo. Reporters angled for sound bites, but the 3 veterans of those first Marble Hall battles mostly watched welders align the last girder, a ritual older than spreadsheets. Miguel nudged JD. Remember when they called us quarterly bomb throwers? JD grinned. Turns out bombs can build if they're made of data. Ariana added. And if the timer's loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood. When sparks finally sealed steel to steel, a foreman handed JD a marker. He wrote 2 words on the cooling beam, line held. Cameras clicked. Social feeds sighed nostalgic emojis. Georgetown revisited. 1 week later, Georgetown University hosted Sunbeam 5, a global summit on radical transparency. Vice President, now President Kamala Harris, delivered the keynote in the same auditorium where it began. Age brushed silver at her temples, but the cadence carried the same velvet hammer. We proved that sunlight is not a flash grenade, but a sunrise blinding at first, then revealing paths we never knew we could walk. She cited EU adoption of quarterly labour disclosure, Brazil's crowd-audited deforestation stats, and 50 US cities publishing real-time police overtime, none of it perfect, all of it brighter than before. JD followed with a quieter talk titled, Maintaining the Bulb. He warned of complacency, algorithmic distortions, and the temptation to treat dashboards as destiny. His final slide was blank white. If this screen ever goes dark, he said, move heaven, and hashtags to light it again. In the lobby, Janelle Price, now policy director for a civic tech nonprofit, installed an exhibition. The original red-blue marble she'd hurled now split and epoxy-fused into purple, encased beside a printed .csv sheet. A plaque read, Protest, Process, Progress. The shadows return. No victory is absolute. In year 5, a recession nipped global markets. Job losses crept into the watchdog feed like rust spots on a silo. Anxious voices resurfaced. Quarterly truth worsens fear. A freshman congresswoman proposed biannual data for stability. Cable panels replayed 2025 hysteria B-roll. Leonard Koch, now a lobbyist, penned an op-ed, When Sunbeams Scorch. The bill to halve disclosures advanced through a subcommittee, while headlines fixated on foreign crises. Social media, grown lethargic with success, yawned. Dolores arthritis slowing her, but will Unbroken called JD from her nursing home rec room. They're sneaking curtains back, sweetheart. JD phoned President Harris. Round two, she said, and summoned the coalition. The 48-hour blaze Ariana resurrected QR pins, this time neon gold. Emily Brooks live-streamed a crash course, How to Read the Labor Drop in 5 minutes, no MBA required. Zainab translated into 7 languages. TikTok flooded with Eura and Keep It quarterly jingles. Retirees recorded duet videos reciting wage numbers like gospel verses. Within 48 hours, inbox analytics showed a 300% spike. Curtains weren't sneaking anywhere. On the House floor, repeal faltered by 70 votes. Dolores, watching from a wheelchair with confetti print upholstery, whispered, line held to no one in particular. Personal epilogues. JD Vance declined a presidential draft, choosing instead to chair the new Committee on Open Metrics. When asked why he passed on the Oval Office glare, he replied, Sunlight's plenty bright where I'm standing. Kamala Harris, final term winding down, prepared the Sunbeam transition memo, urging successors to defend data like borders. Her portrait in the White House would feature the watchdog pin on her lapel. Ariana Nguyen launched Lighthouse Coding Corps, sending students to towns that lacked GIS staff so local numbers could join the daylight. Miguel Rosas retired from the line to teach high school shop class. Unit circles on the chalkboard bored him. Showing teens how to convert payroll CSVs into wage gap graphics did not. Emily Brooks won a Pulitzer for a documentary titled CSV Nation. The credits rolled over footage of midnight coders refreshing the watchdog site, yawning but smiling. Final scene, the refrigerator light one. Quiet evening. JD visited his mother's old house, now Dylan's. The kitchen smelled of basil and motor oil. Dylan restored motorcycles by the back porch. JD opened the vintage fridge. Magnets still pinned the faded first-quarter sheet edges, yellowed. Beneath it lay a recent printout columns. Steadier now, less thrilling, more trustworthy. Progress sometimes looks like a straight line. He closed the door. The tiny bulb flicked off. Yet even in darkness he could picture every cell of that table, because the numbers had branded themselves onto the civic retina. Stepping onto the porch, he watched fireflies pulse across the yard. Brief, honest bursts. No secrecy, just rhythm. He raised a glass of iced tea to the humid air and said the words that had carried him through riots of applause and pockets of hatred. May the next person who tries to hide the truth find no shadows left to stand in. The screen door creaked. Dylan joined him holding 2 helmets. Night ride. JD smiled. Let's chase sunbeams. They kick-started the engines. Headlights cut twin cones through Ohio dusk, joining insect street lamps and data points in a republic still imperfect, but for the first time in memory, consistently, stubbornly lit.